Hi, everyone. Welcome to This Week in Impact, where ImpactAlpha editors discuss some of the most interesting impact investing and sustainable finance stories of the week. I'm Brian Walsh. It's Thursday, August 15th. Today I'm joined by ImpactAlpha's editor, David Bank. We'll discuss this week's Agents of Impact call on mapping an impact investing path through the new legal landscape, whether impact fund managers are in fact making the mark when it comes to impact measurement and management, and how impact investing has gone mainstream via plot lines in the third season of HBO's hit show Industry. That's all coming up on This Week in Impact. Welcome, David. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Now, you had a busy week. You were hosting this week's Agents of Impact call, where you brought together a range of perspectives on how impact investors might navigate the new legal landscape in light of recent Supreme Court rulings. Walk us through some of the highlights from the call.
Yeah, we had a great turnout, and I think it was because it was a bit of kind of counter programming. So a lot of attention obviously has been focused on the presidential race and the election in general. But the Supreme Court, the other branch of government, those decisions will live on regardless of who wins. So we focused on a trio of cases that came up at the end of the court's term last June. For folks who want to impress their friends at dinner parties, just remember the term Loper Bright. And folks who've been reading along in ImpactAlpha and elsewhere will know that overturned something called the Chevron deference, which had given regulatory agencies precedence over court decisions when interpreting statutes and regulations. And that and the other two cases combined present what folks were calling an assault or undermining of the administrative state. And so a whole new kind of regulatory framework is now kind of in place and litigation framework. And in court cases all over the country on all kinds of things, regulations are being challenged now on the basis of these Supreme Court decisions. And so we tried to walk investors through what they can do in the face of this new landscape, where essentially every regulation will get challenged in court. So, for example, we've been tracking the new climate risk disclosure rules from the SEC, which were several years in the making, finally got handed down from the SEC and promptly pulled back because of a lawsuit. And this, has gone on across dozens now of rulemaking and regulatory processes.
All right, so what can investors do in light of these changes?
There's a whole legal strategy, of course, and Dennis Kelleher from Better Markets leaned into that and how folks can think proactively about how to kind of legal proof both the original legislation, which is key, and then the regulatory implementation as well. But investors have a certain amount of power themselves. They are the owners of companies, and they can weigh in particular in shareholder resolutions and that sort of thing, but also more broadly as just making clear that, just because the climate risk disclosure rulemaking went away doesn't mean climate risks went away. Here's Dennis Kelleher about investor power.
Capital is power. You have a lot of power. The question, you have a lot of power individually, and you have even more power collectively. And leveraging that power and strategically deploying that power can counterbalance the power that's being exerted against you in other places. So that's really important, I think, to remember and remind yourself that, yes, these are bad cases. Yes, things are going in the wrong direction in a number of places. But at the end of the day, capital is power. And that power needs to be used in the right way strategically.
Well, David, that sounds all well and good, but sounds pretty challenging to do as an individual investor. So what are the kind of collective opportunities for folks to affect change in this?
It's interesting because collective action itself has come under attack. And as you recall, for example, the House Judiciary Committee has gone after some of the climate action groups for colluding. I think they called them a climate cartel. And trying to sort of dissuade folks from working together on issues like climate or on diversity, equity, inclusion. Rachel Roboshoti from Adesina Social Capital pushed back hard against that notion. They've helped form an organization called freedomeconomy.org that does education and sort of resources for folks facing these kind of legal attacks or legal challenges, and says that kind of collective action around common issues, around education, around legal understandings is perfectly legal and in fact absolutely required. Here's Rachel.
In the end, these attacks are reducing your freedom as an investor, as an owner of these businesses, right, to exercise your full oversight. And it's reducing your ability to outsource any of that to the government. So they're leaving that responsibility squarely in our laps. It's more important now than ever before that you continue doing what you've been doing. You've been seeking out asset managers who understand this critical role of investors and push companies to maintain transparency, accountability, to rein in corporate excesses. Keep doing that.
All right, David. Well, we will keep covering this issue as it evolves and as investors fully understand the implications of these recent Supreme Court rulings and what it does to the legal landscape. But for now, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll discuss a new report on the quality of impact reporting by fund managers representing over $230 billion in impact assets under management. You can't manage what you don't measure, the old saying goes. So how much are impact investors actually managing impact? David, you wrote this week about a new report, Making the Mark, from impact verification firm Bluemark, about the state of impact measurement and management at leading impact fund managers. What stood out to you?
Well, we keyed in on this notion of setting targets. And again, you'd think that it would be a natural thing for an impact fund manager to set impact targets and, as you said, manage to those targets. There turns out to be a little more complicated than that. We had Tristan Hackett from Bluemark, and they've just completed a study of some hundreds of asset managers with, as you said, 200 and some billion dollars in assets. They found that somewhat under half, I think 42%, actually set targets before they made their investments. A somewhat larger number, I think just over 50%, set targets after the investment. They work with the companies to set their impact targets. But still not really the dominant practice in the industry. And the reason is, frankly, that you can't be held accountable for something you haven't promised. So you open yourself up to perhaps liability, but certainly opprobrium if you set a target, an impact target, and you don't hit it. So Bluemark and others are working with fund managers to help them learn how to set appropriate targets. They talk about ambitiousness, also the materiality of the target, including to your financial results, and finally the measurability of the targets. And if you look at those three parameters and work it through, you find that you can set targets, measure yourself against them, and that it might improve your overall business as well.
So what does it say about the state of the impact investing marketplace or industry if the self-defined impact fund managers aren't always setting the meaningful targets themselves?
Well, I think it's a continuum, and there has been progress. There's things like the operating principles for impact management, which set out kind of best practices or guidelines for fund managers for the process of managing impact. How do you, setting targets and how do you measure? They don't necessarily hold you up for the outcomes of your investments. There are other targets and benchmarks coming to the fore, the Science-Based Targets Initiative on corporate climate action, the 2X criteria for gender inclusivity. Benchmarks are becoming more prevalent, so you can rank yourself or grade yourself against like-minded peers. So the whole practice of impact measurement and management is becoming much more sophisticated, much more rigorous, and somewhat more adopted.
So there are green shoots that you see, but a lot more work to be done.
Certainly a lot more work to be done. This work has been mostly, as I said, on the process level. And then when you actually get to the impact itself, we're still falling short as well. We had another story this week about an energy impact benchmark that the Global Impact Investing Network put out, grading the intensity of carbon emissions from energy investments, even from self-styled impact investors. And instead of going down, as we think that carbon emissions should among impact climate investments, they actually as a whole went up. So yes, much more work to be done.
So David, taking a step back, looking at a systems level here, what's stopping the overall market from adopting these standards? Is it the kind of implementation of the standards? Is it the ongoing measurement and reporting? Is it the alignment of incentives? Is it the demand from limited partners for these kind of metrics?
I think you hit it at that last one. When limited partners demand something, then the general partners, the fund managers, often respond. And so that seems to be where the main impetus comes from. The limited partners want to know, if they're impact investors, they want to know that are they getting any impact? So they want their fund managers to measure it. The fund managers then, press on the portfolio companies to report and to measure and to set targets as well. And in many cases, they pay for that because that has been considered kind of an overhead burden to place on the founders and the entrepreneurs. So the trend has been for the fund managers to pick up the tab on that kind of measurement and reporting, so that they can report up to their LPs. So the key to making this much more widespread is for LPs, for that's the institutional pension funds and others, but also the family offices and the high net worth individuals and even retail investors at that level, to say, look, we want to know whether this impact investment that we're getting into actually has any impact.
What a concept. All right, well, let's take a quick break. When we come back, our producer extraordinaire, Isaac Silk, will come on mic to discuss HBO show Industry, whose third season opened a new storyline on impact investing. Producer Isaac Silk makes this very show possible, and he's joining David and I now to discuss one of his favorite shows, HBO's Industry. Hi, Isaac, and welcome to being on this side of the microphone.
It's an honor and a pleasure to be on the show with you, Brian.
Yeah, Isaac, you came in so excited at our editorial meeting because you just watched one of your favorite shows, Industry, and lo and behold, there was a familiar plotline.
Well, yeah, me and my fiance love watching Industry. We were really excited to see this new season was coming out. It's a fun show. It's all the finance stuff is usually kind of rolling over people's heads, but so yeah, mostly people I think are watching for the sex and the interpersonal drama. But lo and behold, on my weekend, I was confronted with a bunch of impact investing content, so I had to bring it up.
Right. So this season 3 premiere of the show demonstrates the mainstreaming of impact and sustainable investing. So why are you excited about this development?
Well, I don't know if we necessarily should be excited, because I'm not sure that people who are watching the show are going to take away positive things about impact from it. There's a lot of, I'll just list some of the plot points. For instance, the big bank that our main characters work for or have worked for, spoiler alert, is putting forward an IPO for a solar or renewable energy company run by a posh aristocrat who sort of is playing as a startup guy, but seems to be from a very upper class background. And he also seems to be fudging the numbers in terms of the upside and also the downside. So there might be a big problem for our characters in terms of the IPO. And also a lot of the people within the bank think that ESG is just a fad and that it's all greenwashing or that the fundamentals aren't there. Of course, one of our main characters has also joined a woman-led impact hedge fund, which seems to be a much better work environment than her previous job at this sort of version of JP Morgan Chase that they all work at, although this one's London-based. But she, our sort of protagonist in the impact hedge fund, is very impact skeptical as well. So there seems to be a lot of impact skepticism coming from the writers, at least so far in episode 1.
Which probably represents fairly accurately some of the skepticism that ESG and impact investing gets from some of the more commercially minded traditional legacy financial industry, right?
Yeah, the showrunners for Industry are both ex-bankers, so this is clearly at least how they envision things are being viewed within the financial services industry that they're imagining on the show. And to that point, I wanted to play a clip that I think is particularly demonstrative of the show's perspective. We have here Harper, who is that person who's working at the women-led impact hedge fund, and she's making a play to be reinstated as a trader. Right now, she's at the bottom of the org chart after having gotten fired from her previous job. So this is her talking to another impact skeptical portfolio manager and sort of making her play to get back towards the big time.
Everybody and their snotty brother claim to be ESG. The assets that qualify as it are so big, the valuations are making them stupid investments now anyway. Not to mention macro headwinds, the election, lack of clear-sighted investment in fossil fuels. Really, it's like a utopian opiate for morons who believe in a better world, like whatever the fuck that means. And Lumi, do you really believe that cheap green energy for the masses exists, or is someone spinning a story?
So yeah, you can see there you've got the greenwashing story coming up, and she's calling ESG a fad. And throughout the episode, it was pointed out by some folks on LinkedIn that people may have been the show is using ESG and impact and ethical, sustainable impact investing all somewhat interchangeably, which is not doing a great job of educating the masses, but that's not really what the show is about. But what we can tell from this clip, right, is that Harper thinks the best way to get ahead with the person she's trying to impress is by basically calling it all bullshit.
Now, David, under the auspices of all PR is good PR, even if it's bad, does this kind of mainstreaming of the concept of impact and responsible and sustainable investing in a fictional show like Industry, is this a mark of visibility? That this means that impact investing's time has arrived because it's in the zeitgeist?
Well, certainly, that could be one way of taking it. This is not the first time that impact investing has showed up in the plotline of a popular series. It was in a recent season of Billions, another saga of wealth and corruption. And even there was a mercifully short-lived Netflix series, I think, called Sex Life, in which the main character was an impact investor. He raised a biotech venture fund, and he extolled the virtues of impact investing to his undergraduates. So, pro and con, I guess, as you say, it's definitely something that at least show producers think audiences can relate to, whether they mock it or praise it.
I think the thing we have to remember is that viewers of the show don't necessarily take everything that the characters in it say as being the truth or as being good. I mean, we don't think that everything that Tony Soprano does on The Sopranos is the right thing to do. So I'll be looking at how the overall storylines play out, and also to see if impact investing is something that can get you laid.
There it is. Okay. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for this edition of This Week in Impact. Thank you, Isaac.
Thank you, Brian.
And thank you, David.
Thanks to both of you.
Now, David, what's the best way for people to contact us with feedback?
I think you know this by now, Brian, but it's podcast@impactalpha.com. Send us your feedback and your suggestions.
And send us your hot takes on impact investing showing up in popular culture. Thank you all for listening. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen, and be sure to share it with a friend or colleague. If you want to help out, be sure to rate us and give us a review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps other people find the show. This Week in Impact is a production of Impact Alpha and part of the Impact Alpha podcast network. For more exclusive stories about the world of impact investing and sustainable finance, join other agents of impact by subscribing to Impact Alpha. Just go to impactalpha.com/subscribe for full access. Thanks as always to our producer extraordinaire, Isaac Silk. For David Bank, I'm Brian Walsh. We'll see you next week for more Impact.